Prejudice is a small price to pay for the privilege that I've experienced as a white person in South Africa.
Meet Nina Hastie, an accomplished comedian, voiceover artist, and creative director.
I've really struggled with my mental health since I was about 17, especially with someone like me who has ADHD, whose brain literally does not produce as much dopamine as everyone else's. I was diagnosed with depression. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I was diagnosed with anxiety. I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. They didn't know what it was because they only started doing tests on young girls and women ADHD brains in 2017.
And what was the cost of that?
I didn't have the tools to function in society that I felt I needed. They call it rock bottom. My bad behavior impacted everybody. No one wanted anything to do with me.
How do you unlearn patterns like that?
I had to learn how to sleep. I had to do that because it was affecting the rest. I've also been looking for belonging in a social environment.
Do you feel like you struggle with a sense of belonging right now?
I think what I'm more struggling with is...
Quick one, I've noticed that more than 70% of you who watch the channel on a regular basis are not subscribed. So please, wherever you're watching or listening to this, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps us with spreading this content to more people across this continent. Enjoy this episode. I have high self-esteem.
Amazing. It shows.
But very much high ambitions, high standards. So I don't feel like I am where I'm meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, I was speaking to my counselor about this yesterday, and I associate, this. Firstly, I have this big ambition for not just the show, but like beyond that, very much entrepreneurial, as I read in your journey, you as well. And so there's an expectation of where I feel like I should be, where I'm not at the moment. And for me, I'm like, if I lose that, if I accept where I am, and if I drop that expectation, somehow I associated that with losing the ambition and the drive.
Because this is a pitfall I fell into as well, where you think that you're not enough, but yes, you sort of need that to drive you. Not that you don't think you're enough, but that you haven't achieved enough or whatever. What you need to do is make sure that you've got your own metrics, your own goals, because the fact that you haven't done enough, so what are you comparing that to?
Exactly.
What's your metric?
I'm already comparing to the greats of the world.
Right. So those can be your goals and your markers, but they shouldn't be... My coach / therapist used a picture of Michael Phelps and Chad le Clos in the final when Chad le Clos came second. And if you look at them just before they hit the finish line, Phelps is looking down, he's looking forward, he's in his lane, he's literally in his lane, and he's just about to win. And le Clos is looking at Phelps. Your goals have to be yours. You've got your own unique set of circumstances, your own unique goals, your own unique strengths, the only metric you need to be adjusting for is your achievement of your goals. So yes, the greats are great. So those can be your expanders. Those are people that you can go, okay, cool, that's something that I can learn from. That's something I can achieve because it shows that it's possible. But you shouldn't compare yourself in a situation of lack. We've got completely different socioeconomic situations. We've got a different currency. We've got... we had load shedding, we had this, we had that. These are things that affect consumer behavior. So how are people watching YouTube, etc.? It wasn't such a big thing before because we didn't have as much internet. Equipment is more expensive here, whereas if you're in Asia, for example, or you're in America, their trade systems are different. Equipment is cheaper. It's easier for people to produce things. So to compare yourself to an American YouTube content creator is not the correct metric. It's not your measurement. You need to see those things are possible, great, and my goals are X, Y, Z. So your overarching vision, these are the things I see for myself. And then, okay, cool, these are my sort of short and midterm goals. But then I've got ADHD, right? So for me, I need to chase the feeling of success, or that I'm doing something. So now I've started instilling milestones. Okay, cool. I put these goals in at Q3 last year, and now I've hit those milestones in Q1 and 2 this year. Great. What do Q3, 4 look like? What does 26 look like? What does 27 look like? And then from there on. But at the moment, I need to restructure what the big vision is. I know what up to 2027 looks like. Before, when I said in 2020, I made a 20-year plan. Actually, in 2017, I made a 20-year plan.
How granular?
Broke it down into different pillars. So relationships, family, diet, health, career, financial. Those are 2 different categories. I've now added things like hobbies and travel because I need more balance in that space, but friends, relationships. So even in those spaces, I needed goals, because when I work later, I need to go, okay, well, friends and relationships aren't my priority, but those actually were my priority in the last 3 years. I needed to focus on that for my mental health, and my business wasn't my priority, and that's okay. So that's what helps you to take the pressure off yourself. Like, I haven't achieved something, but that wasn't on my plan for the year. My plan was to make sure that I learn how to sleep properly. I had to learn how to sleep. I spent the whole of last year learning how to sleep. I had to do that because it was affecting the rest. I need this machine, Nina Hastie, to run the machine that is Nina Hastie PTY.
Back to your analogy about the swimming pool. So those 2 athletes that were competing, they were in the same swimming pool. I'm comparing myself to someone who is in an Olympic swimming pool,
Right.
when I'm still in the high school practicing.
Yes. So that's not
And
supposed to be a
the-
comparison.
100%. That's the problem. We're not even in the same swimming pool
Yeah.
to start off with. And in my mind, once I break that part and compare myself perhaps to, if I have to compare myself, to the point at which they were in that high school swimming pool.
Right.
Because we all start somewhere.
Right.
That for me helped,
Okay.
along with what you mentioned about the milestones, the stepping stones, as I like to call it, because it's getting you somewhere. And I feel like if I'm not making progress, I'm stagnating, which then leads to the comparison. It's crazy how your mind works.
Sometimes abuse can receive a dopamine reward in your brain. That's why people stay in toxic relationships. That's why people continue with alcohol, drugs, toxic relationships, food, codependency, because you're getting a reward system from something that is familiar. So you've got to train your brain to get rewards from other things.
It's feeding the itch.
Yeah, whatever the itch is. Especially with someone like me who has ADHD, whose brain literally does not produce as much dopamine as everyone else's, whose prefrontal cortex only fully developed at 35. So your impulse control, you don't have as much as everybody else. That's where impulse control lives. So impulse control for aggression, for decision making, for being able to not compare yourself to somebody else, to want to just do that thing because that's exciting,
When were you diagnosed?
I've really struggled with my mental health since I was about 17, because you must understand, when I was 17, I was only correctly diagnosed 2.5 years ago.
And before that, did you
I've
just
had
think?
many different diagnoses. I was diagnosed with depression. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I was diagnosed with anxiety. I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. They didn't know what it was because they only started doing tests on young girls and women, ADHD brains, in 2017. Now, the studies didn't exist when they were trying to diagnose me. As a result, I have now formed long-term patterns that have presented what looks like a mood disorder, because ADHD does present in extreme highs and extreme lows. And if that pattern has formed, those neuropaths are very deep in the brain. I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist. This is just from my understanding of what I've been explained to, and the medication that I take and the way that I have to manage things, I'm now a lot more stable. But it requires a full-time focus on maintaining my mental health in order for me to function.
But talk to me about your formative years. So how would you describe, the question I like to ask is the nest that you were nurtured in?
I remembered a different version of my life. And one day my sister sat me down. She's like, what is this terrible childhood that you were talking about? You had a wonderful childhood. And I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. I had this wonderful childhood. I had a wonderful upbringing. My parents were divorced, so I grew up with two families, but both very still involved in my life. And I got all the support from my family for my sports and academia, etc., which I'll go into now. But there's a socio-political thing that I'd like to address that I hope doesn't get lost in translation when you cut this clip up. I moved to Johannesburg from Pretoria as a white woman from a Model C school and immersed myself in urban music in the early 2000s, so 2002. I moved to Johannesburg. I worked for Sony Music, for the record label. I was a rapper, like crazy thing, but I moved in a lot of like urban music circles, live music, Yeovil, Rosebank, like really immersed in a different kind of world to what I grew up in. And I only realized this much later that I've actually tried to paint the picture of my life terribly because I had white guilt. And I didn't want to come across as privileged. I didn't know that that's what I was doing. So in my mind, I started believing that nonsense.
When did you realize that you were doing this?
Only recently. I maintained that nonsense story to myself for a long time. And then recently my sister was like, what are you talking about? Mom and dad and Bako and Deda, that means granny and grandpa, used to take you to karate. I did Kumon maths. I did karate. I had my black belt by the time I was 13. They used to take me, I used to train twice a day, 6 days a week. I did all the cultural activities. I went to the School for Gifted Children after school. So, I did absolutely everything, and I was supported by my family. Yes, my family weren't the wealthiest family, so I always had jobs. I worked from about the age of 12. I'd go work at the hardware store on Sundays, or I'd pack bags after school at Spa so that I could buy like my karate suits and my hockey kits and things like that. So when I was 16, from age of 16, I could waitress. So I was always like working so that I could support my sports and my other activities. I had activities that required karate suits and hockey sticks, and these things are expensive, and tournaments, and those things like entries for and I think my parents also encouraged that for me.
I hear lots of stories about individuals and people that came from, the word is broken homes. That's such a strong word for parents that are separated or divorced, but the word is broken homes, and the effect, the cost of that would be that individual perhaps developing core wounds, which would be abandonment. And then that would kind of like play out in their relationships, in their day-to-day life, trust issues, because of that fear of people leaving you. Because you see that as a child of your parents perhaps not staying together.
So both my parents got divorced when I was very young. When I was 2, both parents got remarried quite soon after that. And my stepdad adopted me so that I could keep that surname, so that my nuclear family, that I wouldn't feel like an outsider. So I grew up with my mom and my stepdad and my sister on that side, and my dad and his wife and their 2 children had their family. And then I'd see my dad when I could and when he could. But I was brought up by the Hasties. This family was still very much involved in my life, but this family raised me, and my grandparents as well. I was also substantially older than all of my siblings because of that gap where the families got divorced and things like that. So I'm 5 years older than my brother, 7 years older than this sister, and 16 years older than this sister. So I'm the eldest. She was a latlamiki. I was the oldest, but I was also always moving between my grandparents' house, between my dad, between my, so I was never really stable. So that had a different effect on me than the abandonment itself. The abandonment did play out in different ways. It was actually not really about abandonment, and I recently discovered that it was actually more a concept of not being chosen.
Compared to perhaps your siblings?
Yeah, to another family or whatever the case may be. So it's not necessarily abandoned.
Interesting. That's how you internalized it.
Yes. And then that played out in my relationships where I constantly found this situation where someone would choose another woman over me.
Because you were projecting that.
And I accepted that. And I thought that's what needed to be reinforced. Interesting, hey?
How do you unlearn patterns like that?
This, by the way, I've figured out by myself. I didn't figure that out in therapy. This was just like self-reflection, looking at things. When I am in therapy, I focus more, I'm more future forward. The sort of like past stuff, I use a different technique. I found that talk therapy doesn't really work for me. It sort of makes you wallow and it's more triggering, whereas I use more like accountability techniques, especially like the 12-step program that I use, which is like when I addressed my like alcohol issues and things like that. So I wasn't like I drink every day kind of person. I cannot metabolize alcohol the same way other people do. It makes me black out. I forget things. And I've been sober, this year will be 12 years. So I went into a 12-step program. That's what they call them. So like an anonymous program. And I was like a binge drinker. I think a lot of South Africans are binge drinkers. I think that that's generally the culture that we have socially. But the knock-on effect that it had on me with my mental health setup, it just didn't work for me. But also, I didn't have the tools to function in society that I felt I needed, right? And it showed in my behavior. My life was unmanageable. So those 12 steps helped me to acknowledge accountability. Where did I go wrong? Where do I have resentments? Where do I have fears? What are those things where are my character defects? Oh, okay, cool. I do this when I'm afraid. Because you only fear resentment, like, and how you like live your life. A lot of like bad behavior comes from resentment. Like, like generally when you've done something or you behave in a certain way, it stems from a resentment. And the resentments stem from fear. And fear can be broken up into two things. I fear something I'm going to lose, or I fear something that I'm not going to get. Okay, so I fear losing money, economic stability, emotional stability, social status. I fear not being the best CEO podcaster in the world. I fear losing what I have as the best CEO podcaster in the world. I fear losing my social status, or I'm not going to make money, so that's loss. Or I'm not where I want to be. So those fears present in resentments, and the resentments present in character defects and behavior. Then you don't take accountability.
Do you think that the fear also stems from those core wounds that we're speaking about?
Yes, sure. So that's why I'm saying, like, I use but I only discovered that like retroactively much, much later. Like, why am I always choosing these relationships with that kind of thing? But I needed that little young person inside me created those things to protect me at the time. So I just had to go, okay, little girl that used that to protect yourself at the time, thanks, but I'm going to evolve now.
Acknowledging it and then accepting it and then moving on.
But yeah, there's a step before acknowledgement. It's identifying it.
Oh, the awareness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You said something interesting, which is, talk therapy doesn't really work for you.
No.
You're more geared towards perhaps accountability. That's why the 12-step program worked for you. And also think about this. talk therapy also traditionally doesn't work for me. But reflecting upon it, the reason why it doesn't work is because it's super uncomfortable and it's slow. And I like fast and I like to know the answers right now so I can use it and take action. Whereas talk therapy is sitting in that uncomfortable feeling and acknowledging that and accepting it.
There's space for both. See, because what happens is if there isn't this action-based thing and you only sit in it, you stagnate. And you don't just accept it, you accept it as the truth and you just leave it there, and that becomes your belief system, that becomes your operating system. That's why I don't think that it's as effective as a combined approach. But if you don't have like a 12-step program or a spiritual program or anything that you use for an accountability thing, you have to start somewhere. So talk therapy is a great place to start, but you have to also take action and interest in yourself and have an awareness. The awareness is not enough. The awareness is great, but then you can't weaponize your self-awareness. Oh, I'm just ADHD. That's just who I am. No, you're impacting other people. You have to take accountability. Your behavior, even if I'm ADHD, I've got a medical certificate and that is, Nina has episodes. Okay, cool. But your episodes impact other people. So you've got to find a way that you are not a nuisance to society, to the people around you. Is this impacting your work? Is it making your life unmanageable in any way? Is it making your relationships difficult? Your job as a human being in society is to make sure that your behavior is conducive to the rest of society. You can't just be behaving the way that you want because you're neurodivergent, because you're autistic, because I don't think people understand the extent of, I take 4 different medications. I go to 2 different types of therapists. I go to physical therapies as well. I take a natural approach. I've got an integrative medical doctor. I do all these things to manage my mental health so that I don't make my behavior society's problem.
When did that switch for you? Because a lot of people, like you said, would just use that as an excuse. Luck of the draw. We're born on this side or we're born on this side. And then use whatever their circumstance is as an excuse instead of taking responsibility, which is what you're describing. But when did it shift for you?
Well, it shifted because I was very selfish, because I was all over the show, because I would just make so many bad decisions that I would wait for somebody to come and rescue me, like I would wait until the point where you have to come and save me because I've run out of options. So my promise to myself was I'm never going to put myself in a position where I don't have an option. Like holistically, I must always have an option to do whatever it is. They call it rock bottom in the AA rooms and things like that, or any sort of like 12-step program. When you hit rock bottom, you feel the need to change. I lost my hair all fell out. I had alopecia from like so much like stress and what I put my body through, partying and alcohol and drugs and things like that in my late 20s. And then I sort of like my bad behavior impacted everybody. No one wanted anything to do with me. I had run out of favors with my whole family, with all my friends. I didn't have friends anymore. Nobody wanted anything to do with me because I would just take and take and take. I would take their energy. I would take their support. I would just abuse the people around me. Like I was very entitled. Like everybody owed me something. And nobody owes you anything. You owe society. You owe it to yourself. Nobody owes you anything. Nobody owes you an answer. Nobody even owes you forgiveness. How crazy is that? You can apologize to someone and they don't have to forgive you. That for me is still a lesson I deal with. They don't owe you forgiveness.
I'm super excited to share that I've teamed up with Latitude Podcast Studio and podcast coach and industry pro, Sean Lutz. Whether you're just starting out or looking to take your podcast to the next level, Sean has the tools and experience to help you get there. Head over to seanlutz.com to book your free call today. Back to the episode. But also very empowering.
Yeah.
Because you decide
Yes.
that you can do something about it.
Yes.
And for me, that's the ultimate
Yes.
power,
Absolutely.
the choice.
Exactly. So that's what the core of like the AA thinking is. So the prayer is the serenity prayer. It lives in society. People know this. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. In that moment is this decision. Okay, cool. This is something I can change. This is something I can't change. But then there's another one that's about codependency, which helps as a people pleaser or a former people pleaser, because I like people to like me. That's one of the dopamine validation kicks, people like you. That's great. This is also what society is training us at the moment, is that we have to be liked. We have to be accepted. We have to, and that's why I like a lot of virtue signaling. People change their own opinion on something just so that people will like them.
You know what's crazy about people pleaser? People pleasing, just because you're speaking about this now, you are actually manipulating how people perceive you.
100%. It is manipulative. It is pandering. It's inauthentic. It is completely inauthentic. It's not who you are. And if you don't know who you are, you start manipulating other people and yourself. And you become like this wishy-washy amoeba without a spine. It's nonsense. Which is why you need the rest of the structures to know, okay, these are my values. This is what I believe in. And those can change. You can adjust them, sure. But they need to exist in the first place so that you can make decisions that are either yes or no to that thing. My value system dictates that I say yes to this kind of thing. My value system dictates that I say no to this. And that values and morality get confused a lot. Pork, morally, in certain religions, isn't something that you can eat. Whereas in other cultures, it's like, wow, we farmed this so well. This is our excellent prize pork from South Korea or from Bloemfontein or, Texas or whatever. There's different different morality. Some people think that there's morality according to that, eating pork, that it's bad from a moral perspective, and other people think that it's good from a moral perspective. So morality is subjective to your cultural upbringing, whereas a value system is something that you can instill on yourself and go, I don't hurt other people, or in my value system, I go, I don't sit on the fence. I take equity in everything that I do, whether it's creative equity or strategic equity, or I don't do it unless that is it. So I've got my own 10 commandments that I have my value system. I only eat where I'm fed. I only stay in environments that are good for me, because self-esteem is environmental.
It's almost the guardrails.
100%.
And I heard this quote, I can't remember where it was, but virtues are values in action.
Ooh.
And so virtues are, I think, something that we need to be speaking about more, because it's how you practice your values. And this, I think, comes from Far East and the culture there, which is very much, stemmed from how you treat yourself, how you want to be treated, you treat others, the golden rule. And so that was also a switch for me. Yes, these guardrails can change because we grow, we learn. We don't do the same things in our 20s that we do in our 30s. There's different seasons.
Also, the stakes are high.
But how you practice it is what matters.
You can practice however, but if you're not taking stock of yourself, it doesn't matter. But you can't take stock of yourself if you haven't set those values in the first place. So again, what is the metric? What are your metrics? What are you measuring yourself against? You constantly have to go back to, what is my value system? What are my goals? What is my environment dictate?
Just going back into from a professional career. At 13, you were on the radio. So if I had to ask that 13-year-old Nina what she wanted to be, what would she have told me?
Probably famous.
Doesn't matter the medium.
I think when I was young, I understood that fame would be the tool I could use to unlock the things I wanted to say and do. I always knew that I had a very futuristic thinking. I could always see the future of behavior, trends, behaviors, political trends, social trends. I've always seen things from a very macro perspective. Like I can't really explain it. Maybe I should go and study futurism.
Who are you modeling? Were they like heroes at that point in your life?
My mom was a very big hero of mine, particularly at that age. She had just sort of overcome breast and lymph cancer when she was young. She got diagnosed when she was 36. And she would go to chemo by herself, take herself there. Nobody went with her. And she would, that on Tuesdays, she'd go to chemo. And then on Tuesday nights, she'd be in the dojo and she'd be training. She got her brown belt while having chemo. She didn't lose her hair. What I saw about my mom is my mom didn't let anything stand in the way of her goals. So she was very much my hero. I also just liked, I loved Madonna, and I loved Cher, and I loved crazy comedians. Like I loved Rowan Atkinson, John Cleese, like people that did silly stuff. I loved Monty Python. I liked people that could manipulate their voices. So because my mom worked in the afternoons and everybody sort of worked, what I would do, because I wanted to make sure that I was the best at spelling, I had some other Miss Ladybird in like grade 1. My mom let me into like a beauty contest, but I won the Pretoria section of it. And then I didn't make it through to the like national finals, but because they interviewed me afterwards, they're like, what are you going to do with the money? And I was like, buy a Ferrari, obviously. I love cars. I saved that money. I won like 300 Rand. Like in 1990, 300 Rand was a lot of money. And I bought this like tape deck stereo. So I had 2 tapes, and I would tape a lot off the radio. I would also, it had a recording thing, so I could tape my own voice. So I would read all my spelling words to myself, and I'd leave a space. I'd record. I'd be like, how do you spell ship? And then I'd like wait, with knowing that that would be enough time for the thing. Because if I looked at the page and I went ship and I spelt it, that would be cheating. So I knew that I'd have to ask myself the question. So I would record those things. So I got very familiar with the sound of my own voice. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are like, but I can't listen to myself. And I was just like, well, I did it out of function. I also loved listening to the radio. I loved talk radio, but I loved music. I think I'm a frustrated DJ. I'm constantly searching and finding new music. I love live music shows. I'm always on YouTube discovering new bands, and from all over the world. Like there's these Argentinian kids that I'm so into at the moment that I just think their offering is so cool. I'm a K-pop girly, love K-pop. I'm always into like very interesting new stuff, seeing how people are expressing themselves. I also find something very beautiful about how we get to the same result with completely different circumstances all over the world, but we have so much in common. If you zoom out of the world, we have so much more in common than we think.
100%. It's interesting, right? Because you were mentioning the comedians and those individuals that were maybe unusual. On the music side, also very much the same. And there's like an underlying theme of aspiring to or watching and resonating with these people that are out of the box thinkers and doers. Do you see yourself being that?
Yeah, I didn't realize that now that you're saying that. Yeah, I've always had my own opinions about stuff. I've never let anybody dictate anything to me. And I think my mom also kind of raised me that way. I was allowed to choose my own religion. So we went to, I was baptized in the Orthodox church, but then my mom, when she got remarried, married a Catholic man, and then we went to catechism, which is Sunday school for Catholics. So I learned about that. But my mom also took me to theosophy. Now, theosophy is the school of all religions. So I learned about Buddhism, I learned about Judaism, I learned about Christianity, I learned about the occult in terms of psychicness, psychic stuff, and what astrology is. Well, occult used to be like astrology. Anything that is unseen with the natural eye, that's what occult.
Okay.
So anything that you cannot see. So religion is occult, technically. So anything that from Reiki and healing to like, I was given the opportunity to learn about all of those things. I did a Reiki course by the time I was like 12 with my mom. You know, we did like kinesiology and body talk and light healing and color healing. And I think also with my mom's cancer, she investigated a lot of alternative healing modalities.
What's behind that? Is it searching for something that perhaps, is it hope?
I think it's not hope. That's a good question. That's a very good question. What's behind that? And I only discovered this later with my mom. It was a sense of belonging because they came to this country. My mom actually grew up in Swaziland. So they're this Yugoslav family. So my family, my gran and grandpa came here during the Second World War and they met in South Africa.
They escaped the war?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, my grandfather lived in a refugee camp for like 2 years and then got on a ship. I can go back to like all the way to like the First World War of my family's history, First World War, Second World War, how they came here.
Eastern Europe,
yeah, very interesting. Former Yugoslavia. My family were military families on all sides. The Hastie family, the Wiggett family, the Stepovich family, all military families. Very, very interesting. And which is probably why genetically I'm so like unafraid of stuff, you know? So now imagine you come to South Africa. So my gran and grandpa meet in South Africa. They have their first child. They had 3 children, my aunt, my mom, and my uncle. But then they moved to Swaziland, right? Where my grandfather, so this is now the 60s. In South Africa, there was massive apartheid. In Swaziland, there wasn't apartheid. So my mom, when they moved back to South Africa, when my mom, I think must have been about 14, 15. So her formative years weren't in South Africa. They weren't in this apartheid thinking. So she wasn't indoctrinated the same way other families were. So when they came to South Africa, first of all, they're like, wow, this is super weird. Also because our family are very dark and like, especially like if you see my mom, she had this long black hair and super tanned. And so also a lot of people thought my mom was Indian. And they didn't know what to do with these kids because they were Uitlanders, you know, these Uitlanders. So they didn't know where to place them for school. So they sent them to Carmel, which was a Jewish school. So now they don't fit in with the other whites and the Afrikaners. They're not Jewish, so they're not in that space. And there's no community. Well, there was a very small, but there's no real community of Yugoslav people. So my mom constantly looking for this thing was more about like, well, what, like answers? Where do I belong?
Where do I fit in?
Where do I fit in? To be like this weird minority that is white passing or South African passing, but actually doesn't have its own community. And I've been experiencing that, the knock-on effect of that, because I have the same issue. Because I was like, I didn't find that English families, I couldn't really relate to the way that English people were, couldn't really relate to the way Afrikaans people were. They were much more conservative. But other communities, like my friends that were Zulu or had Zulu families or Tswana families, I was like, oh, that makes more sense. That's more inclusive.
Strong sense of community.
Strong sense of community. My cousin who married into an Indian family as well, I was like, oh, this makes more sense. A strong sense of family, strong sense of community. So those cultures made more sense to me in comparison to the type of home that I was brought up in. So a lot of people are like, what's up with Nina? Why is she so... But we've just got to... I've also been looking for belonging in a social environment that makes sense. So the religion, I think, is core to that. If we go back to like the value system, okay, these people share my values. These people share my behavior. These people share the way that we do things.
Do you feel like you struggle with a sense of belonging right now?
I think what I'm more struggling with is prejudice. Because people are like, well, what are you? Why are you? So they judge you before. But I'm like, prejudice is a small price to pay for the privilege that I've experienced as a white person in South Africa. People of color are prejudiced, that experience prejudice all the time.
I think it makes sense for people because they want to make sense of you by putting you in a box.
Yeah,
And if
100%.
they put you in the box, then they understand, okay, cool, because in their mind,
Yeah.
it's this, it's this, it's this, it's this.
Yeah, exactly.
And most of society operates like this, right?
But they're putting me in a box and then they're going, I'm going to put you in that box. It's not my box. And I'm going to hate you for it.
That's where the problem comes in.
Yes.
I don't agree with that
Yeah,
box.
it's horrible. It's horrible. But, and I've said this to people that have been falsely accused of like sexual assault and things like that. You know, they're like, but I didn't do it. I've been falsely accused of something. I'm like, well, you know what's worse than being falsely accused of sexual assault? Sexual assault.
Yeah, that's bars.
So I hear you, and it's something that you have to experience and defend of yourself, and it's a hard and horrible route to have to go, being accused of something that you're not. Time always tells. Time always tells. Whenever anybody accuses me of being a shitty friend or of like, she's so this or she's so that or whatever, I'm just like, okay, cool. Let that person go and talk cuck. She's going to go cause cuck there and cuck there and cuck there, and I'm still going to be here. Time will tell. You'll come around. When you grow up, you'll find that I was just a stable person. I don't like people talk cuck all the time. You're responsible for your journey. So you must stay stable. You must stay constant. You must stay steady. Your accountability matters. People are going to have prejudice against you. You just have to stay steady.
100%. Not taking it personally.
It's so hard.
Yeah,
It's
is.
really hard. And it's something that I struggle with all the time. But I have to remind myself these rules all the time so that I don't get distracted by the pity party that I've created in the thing. Because that is in itself a distraction. It's a painful distraction because, again, your brain is rewarding you for the distraction, the pain, the suffering. That still releases dopamine. So you can become addicted to the pity party in itself. So you have to retrain yourself the whole time and create new neural paths in your brain for that thing. It's hard. I've struggled with something very recently that like consumed me for 2 months of just absolutely like self-flagellating. I'm the worst person in the world. I made a joke and made someone feel terrible and the whole industry hates me and like really like, and I was like, okay, well, remember your rules. People don't have to forgive you.
In that specific instance, how do you take that feedback and learn from it, perhaps take responsibility, but also on the other side, it's freedom of expression. It's you're not responsible for how others feel. You are.
It's hard.
Yeah.
You have to actually go through that whole process, and then you have to have courage to accept whatever it is. You have to have courage, and it's hard. But if you don't go through the work, the thing is, if you spend time just looping and looping and looping and looping, you're just gonna stay stuck like a glitch, like a sim walking against a wall. You know, like yes, you have to go through the process. Okay, cool. Let's close the loop here. Let's close the loop here. Then when you've run out of like loops to close and you're still looping, now you're just being inefficient. Now you're just wasting your own time. Now you're just wasting your own energy when you could be building the next thing that is positive. You have to learn how to release that. And it is excruciatingly painful and difficult, but you actually have to action your way out of that kind of behavior.
And it's easy to stay there because you're essentially playing the victim.
And I mean, like I said, I've just wasted 2 months playing a victim on something in my mind. And it sat on my heart. Every morning I woke up and I thought about it. Every night before I went to sleep, I thought about it. I offered an apology to the person. They forgave me. I still thought about it. Like, I really, really struggled with this thing because I felt in that moment it was inauthentic to who I was. And I don't like hurting people. My comedy rule is as long as it doesn't hurt anyone. And I discovered that I didn't realize at the time that it hurt the person, but when I spoke to them, they were like, listen, it really hurt me. And I was absolutely devastated that it hurt them because I'm actually not a malicious person. I think a lot of the bravado and what people think is my like public persona is, very hard, but I'm very empathetic and very soft and very considered and very kind and very nurturing. And that can't live on stage always, you know. That's my personality. But the stage persona tells jokes and has opinions, you know, and is very like high status, whereas I'm actually quite like down to earth.
How did you get into comedy, and what attracted you to the medium?
It was an accident. I was trying to be a DJ. Like I told you, I'm a frustrated DJ. But my boyfriend at the time was a DJ. And this was before like apps and things. So you had to collect your own records. And records were expensive. And I would borrow his records and go and play gigs. And he was like, if you want to be a DJ, you have to go and buy your own records. And I was like, well, this is an expensive profession. I don't think I have the money for the overheads of this. They've got to buy equipment, they've got to buy. So I was like, well, what can I do that doesn't require equipment? And then we used to hang out with a lot of comedians, Joey Rasdeen and Loyiso Gola, and we were all mates. And they were like, you're funny. You should do stand-up. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll try. And then I like got up on stage and just told a joke that I knew, like an old like bride joke that everybody knows from the books. And I got a laugh, and I was like, oh, wait, this is actually my thing. And then I realized that I've been on show my whole life, like, you know, doing like the school plays and things like that. My grandparents had a restaurant, and my dad had a restaurant, and they'd send me to the tables to go and tell them stories. So I've been like telling people stories and making people laugh like my whole life.
You've been practicing the craft since you were young.
Yeah, I just didn't realize.
That's super interesting. Something I think about is the creative process. Because it doesn't happen in the office when you're behind your laptop and working. It happens when you're doing live.
That's such a good insight.
Do you have sort of a structure around that?
Two things. One, you mustn't just wait for inspiration to hit. You have to have a routine about how you write. So you need to discover what your own routine is, when your brain is most effective or whatever. I find deadlines help. Okay, you book the show, you book the venue, you phone the promoter, and you're like, cool, let's start advertising. And then I'm like, okay, well, I guess I better write a show now. You know, so like I almost do it retroactively. Like I need this because I need a goal to work towards. And then my brain is like, okay, cool, I have to function. But in terms of the actual material, you have to have experienced stuff, like you said. So you have to live life. So you, like part of your job is to live life to its fullest. Go on adventures, be spontaneous, do things. But then you also need to be quiet and let your brain just wander. Days where you just don't have anything booked, don't have a podcast to go to or a meeting to go to or whatever, where you switch off and you just, whatever your thing is, whether you walk in the mountains or I went for a hike this morning before the podcast already.
Is that why you were late?
Yeah, actually, you must have time to do nothing. Because what happens is like your brain is doing stuff in the background. So you have had to have experienced stuff, and then you need quiet time for that experience to like nestle in your brain and to bubble up to things. And you just need time to be free to think. As an artist, you need time to do nothing, because in that nothingness is when thoughts form. And you have to take a stance on stuff. You can't just, I don't like basic stuff like racially comparative comedy or insult comedy or whatever. No, there has to be a insult comedy is so, what is this? Like, are we in Standard 5 and like, your mom is so fat, you know, like there's...
And not many people can pull that off.
I mean, not just, they can't pull it off, not just from a skill perspective, they're not allowed to. Like, I can't do that because that's exactly what just happened.
Yeah.
Like, certain comedians, people of color, things like that, can do that politically. As soon as I do it, you're not allowed to. It changes the narrative. Mm-hmm. It's not my style either. So to try and do someone else's, now I'm doing butterfly in the backstroke division. It doesn't make sense. And that's also why there was a retrofit. Like, that's not my style. It's not something I do. Now I'm comparing different styles. That's also not fair to myself. And that person's style is effective and it's strong and it works for people. That's not who I am. I do this. If you're looking for this, come and choose me for this thing. It's not, you can't compare yourself.
But also that comes from once more knowing yourself.
And it takes so long to figure yourself out. I figure stuff out every day. I'm still learning this stuff every day. But the most important thing for me is to have an opinion and then think about the thing to the point where you're like, okay, this is what's happening. I have this opinion. This is how I think life could be different for people. This is how a different perspective on what people think of this thing. Well, this is what I'm outraged about. I get outraged about stuff that it really upsets me. That's my kind of comedy, where I get upset about, like, why are men wearing skinny jeans? Like, it drives me crazy. Like, particularly South African bodies, like men, if you look at, and South African bodies across the board, we're big people because of our diet, because of the way that our lifestyle or whatever. Whereas you look at Asian people, there's like, you can see the stark difference. So I've got this joke where I'm like, I don't care if he's black, white, brown, or purple. Okay, like white people always have to add purple to the story. I don't know who these purple people are. But whether you're black, white, brown, or purple, South African men get big stomachs because of our diet. And they're walking around with big stomachs and high cholesterol and skinny jeans. And I'm just like, guys, it's not doing anything for your body, like fashion-wise. It's not helping you. There's better ways to dress for your build that make you look more distinguished. So why can you just stop wearing your sister's pants? Like, I mean, it's just like, stop doing it. I just think from an aesthetic perspective, we go to so much effort to look good in society, to present well. I wish that men in South African society took the same amount of time and care to respect us as we do for them.
It's funny because they probably think that they do by putting on the skinny jeans.
Yeah, there's no consideration. Consider something outside of what you've just been given. But then again, that's my job. My job is to consider stuff and to present that information to you. Your job is to consume this. And that's our symbiosis. That's my role in society. I go and think about stuff. I give you a different opinion. And you're like, oh, that's a different opinion. Great. I'm a thought leader, not an amplifier. There are some comedians that are just amplifiers. I'm a thought leader. I go and think about my own individual stuff, and then I give you that information.
I like the difference on that.
Yeah.
On the industry side of things, was it challenging to, kind of like build this personal brand and, get more gigs over time? And, just reading your bio, I saw that your big break, as you described it, only came at 34.
Is this my LinkedIn bio, or which bio, the one that was sent to me?
Yeah, firstly, I have to say thank you for writing such a proper LinkedIn bio. It made my job so easy to research you and who you are.
Thank you. I took a lot of time to write that
I could
bio.
see.
Yeah, I was like...
It's like, at 24, I did this.
Yes.
At 25, I did this. At 30, failed business.
Yes.
At 35.
Because I feel like that's the place where it should live, that bio. So that, because people don't know how to process artists in business. So I was like, well, let me give you a full view of what that can look like and why you only saw me in these pockets, or why there were patches in my life. I felt like if you're watching this, like, go and read my LinkedIn bio, because it's artists fall through the cracks systemically. Banking, loans, infrastructure, like employment, contract hire. Like, we fall through the cracks a lot because nobody knows, because there's so few of us. It's so niche, and there's no rule book to how this thing is, and it's not something that every industry or every business uses. Not every person has an end of year function where they have to hire an MC/comedian for their 4-hour conference in November. Not every organization does that. A lot of them do. That's where we do corporate work. Not every organization is doing a social media campaign that requires a female comedian that understands South African social society, that has a following of 100,000 odd followers and has a target market or a market reach of 56% women and 44% men and whatever. Like, that's not... I am this thing, but I have to explain to you where in your business I can fit in. But because you're only seeing this one element of me, you've got to trust the whole business. So I need to give you a bit more context.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. You also have these skills that you've developed, and now you're essentially marketing yourself to a range of customers where set skills can be applied.
Absolutely. So I've had to diversify my skills in order to survive because our industry is so small. We haven't afforded the privilege of specializing. Whereas where there's a bigger industry, you can be a specialist. So in other environments like in the UK or America or whatever, or even in Asia, or like you can be just a lighting specialist, or you can be just a one-line comedian person because they've got so many variety shows. They've got so many different types of comedy shows. There's enough people that are consuming comedy in different forms. It's more sophisticated. It's an industry that's existed for longer. Comedy, the way we know it, was illegal 30 years ago. Think about it. People of color collecting in groups late at night was illegal.
Yeah, when you put it like that.
Our industry is only 30 years old. What we do was illegal. That's why Black voices, people of color, their voices are so important now because they didn't exist before. That's why comedy is so big in those communities. That's why being a white person, I've got to have very new perspectives because there've been a lot of other white voices that have had perspectives before. We've heard those perspectives before. I have to have a very unique perspective because we've seen white voices have perspectives all over the world for a long time. So mine has to be particularly unique.
What's the key to having longevity and sustained success in the industry?
And relevance.
And relevance.
Authenticity. Authenticity, authenticity. If you are authentic to yourself and whatever's going on in you, relation to yourself and yourself in relation to society, and if that is true, and if what you are saying is true, the core of whatever you're offering, the core emotion, the core, like embarrassment is embarrassment, however that plays out. Outrage is outrage, however that plays out. I'm outraged about this because I am who I am and I know myself. The outrage is something everyone can relate to. But
100%.
if you're not telling the truth, if you're not authentic, you're going to lose people, you're going to lose relevance. But if you're constantly evolving and you're constantly being true to yourself and the way that you fit into society, you will always be relevant if you're true to you because you will always exist.
Thank you for explaining that because I've seen this a lot and a lot of people speak about authenticity and it's become this buzzword to the point at which people online I come across content of forced authenticity.
Yes, it's inauthentic.
And then, as you mentioned earlier, time will tell. Because sustained over a long period of time, if you are truly yourself, it will show. And that's my philosophy.
Because you evolve. So there was a moment, and I saw how there was a disconnect because there was a time where I was doing a late night talk show that was live every night for like 3 years on SABC, which was at the same time as comedy shows were happening. So what happened was I'd had a comedy set that I'd built and formed before the TV show had launched. And I didn't have enough time to go and work material and write new stuff in that period while I was doing the TV show. And then I would sometimes book comedy gigs. It was a double-edged sword because now I was finally getting the comedy gigs that I wanted, but the stakes were high because I was famous, so I couldn't fail. So I couldn't do new material because everyone was expecting me to just go in their greatest hits. But I didn't have the time and the stage time to develop new stuff that matched my personal growth and opinions in the space. So it was inauthentic and irrelevant because the things I was saying weren't true to my actual opinions at the time. I had outgrown my material.
And what was the cost of that?
People were like, you're a shit comedian.
There we go.
And I lost audiences. And you're irrelevant. What you're saying is irrelevant. And stigma stayed around for a while. And now when the comedians are seeing me, they're like, oh shit. And I'm like, yeah, there's still a reason why I am who I am. I had to step back from comedy, and I had to step back from the public eye for a while, because I wanted my craft, my skill set, and my personality to match. So I stopped doing like high stakes stuff because I just wanted to be able to develop my skill set. And I'm in the best place I've ever been with regards to stand-up. I'm in a very good place. And I'm loving that everyone still thinks I'm shit, and then they come and watch me and they're like, oh, okay. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. Please underestimate me. It's my favorite thing. I love being underestimated. It was my favorite thing in karate because I was always so small, so no one would ever prepare for me. And I learned how to fight with my legs because I'm a very fast and good kicker. So I'd be able to get close and kick high, and that's how I'd always win, because no one would prepare for me because they thought that I was just like a nonsense person. I love being underestimated. It's like one of my favorite things.
How do you think about brand and IP, especially, going into perhaps, beyond the social media space? Now we're going into the age of AI. We're going into creating avatars.
There's certain elements of my career that are going to be affected by it, and others that aren't. It's like my voiceovers are probably going to be affected. I do a lot of voice work. Maybe not so much in South Africa because we've got such a dynamic set of languages and accent and stuff like that. It could affect it unless physical robots are going to go and do stand-up shows. I don't think that it's going to impact me too much. One thing I am not afraid of personally is running out of ideas. In this economy, in this world of AI, our biggest resource is ideas. And I'm never going to run out of ideas. I've got I trust my brain implicitly. I will have 1,000 ideas by the end of the day. I've got an original brain. It works differently. That's why on my LinkedIn then it says idea merchant. I will sell ideas, whether I'm a creative director for the day, whether I'm a comedian, whether I'm selling you the social media video. I've got ideas for days. So I'm not worried about a robot. The robots actually help me execute my ideas.
Facts. And thinking about it, before we started rolling, perhaps it was during we were rolling, you were speaking about Nina Hastie, PTY. How do you think about yourself as a company, as an entity, and not the individual? So now you can, perhaps let's just talk about earning without giving your time away.
Nina Hastie, PTY. Like any business, you have to have a business plan, which is different to a brand plan. When I look at my core business, I have to go, okay, this is my core business. What does it do? What are the properties around it? Okay, cool. Nina Hastie, PTY is a comedy service company. And comedy lives in a multimedia comedy service company. So I can service comedy as a written form, as a performed form, as a voice, as a creative director, as a MC for an event, as a comedian that sells my own tickets, as merchandise as a result. There's all of these things. But then there's other properties outside of Nina Hastie, Otherwise You Well, the mental health project. That has its YouTube channel, and that has its own little business plan outside of that, which hopefully is going to be scalable in that space where I don't have to be the face of it. Then there's my YouTube stuff that I'm creating here as Nina Hastie. But within the Nina Hastie project, I'm creating equitable, scalable projects. A film that I can create and license to a broadcaster. A YouTube channel that I can film, create its own thing that can be a sponsorship page. All of these things are anchored in the Nina Hastie brand for now. But those projects can create, you can elicit data from the efficacy of these projects and the systems I create around it, because I'm very systems orientated. And I can duplicate that model for someone or something else.
How did you learn about this? And the context of my question is, a lot of creators just think of themselves as this one person who can post on social media and now I can scale my content to anyone in the world. That's one way that I could, perhaps generate revenue. And then of course there's in person that I could perhaps do stand up, or if I'm in music, I could, make music. But they don't think of themselves as this entity, the way you described it, with like a group and then all these different entities stemming below it.
I have mentors. I have a lot of different mentors. One of my mentors is the CEO of an advertising agency. And I can phone him at any point and go, okay, listen, I'm struggling with this. And he goes, okay, run it by me. Let's go. And then he's the one that helped me distinguish the Otherwise You Well is not my core project. Nina Hastie is the Halo brand. This is a core project because he's also the CEO of a group of companies. So he understands how to split those things up. Because again, this isn't traditional thinking. These things haven't existed before. So how I came across that is I just learned along the way. Okay, this is working for me, this isn't working for me. Also, I have to solve for other problems. I have to solve for relevance, right? I have to supersede my gender, and I have to supersede my race, and I have to supersede my age. So I have to create a brand that doesn't rely on those things and still is impactful.
I'm amazed by the way you think.
Oh, really?
And once more, the context is zoom out and think about the bigger picture. And maybe it's just like the way I think everyone should think, but perhaps that's not your goal. Perhaps your goal is to, if you're a comedian, just to do comedy and do that for the rest of your life.
When I chose comedy, why comedy, right? How did I become a comedian? I always wanted to be on stage. I always wanted to be famous. I wanted to be an actor. I used to sing and dance. My dad always used to go, but Maguli, you were so good at those musicals. Why don't you do the musicals? Why are you doing this comedy stuff? What do you really know? What do you know anyway? My family weren't very supportive of me doing this. No, that's a lie. They were completely anti.
Of your craft.
Of my craft. That nobody in my family, except of my gran, really believed that I could do this because they didn't see the vision. And they thought I was cringy and embarrassing and whatever. They were like, go get a job. Go do something else. You know how it is. I looked at all the creative arts. Which one had the lowest overhead requirement? I didn't realize that I actually chose one with one of the highest because I now need all of this equipment. But what thing has the longest shelf life? Because as an actor, you've got a short shelf life, like a sports person. You can only be Salma Hayek for a while, Then there's ageism. There's all kinds of other things that play. Comedians, Joan fucking Rivers. You can be a comedian until you're 80, 85, 90. And guess what's even better about being a comedian? You get better the older you get. You have better opinions. You have more life experience. Your longevity as a career is better. And you get better as you get older.
And you can play the old card.
100%. You can play any card because you're constantly authentic to yourself. So I was like, of all the performing arts, this thing has the longest shelf life. So I was like, when I looked at all the things that I could focus on, do I go voice? I just made a big mind map of all the things that I'm good at. And I was like, okay, what can I develop? Where's the low-hanging fruit? Where can I get quick wins? Cool, let's focus on that for now so that can give me money to do the rest of the things. So voiceovers was like my first push when I came back from my rock bottom. Cool. So I went and found a voice agency. I was like, listen, I know that I'm a disaster and nobody wants to work with me. I'm overweight, I'm bald, I'm unreliable. I'm fully aware of all of this stuff, but I'm really good at voiceovers. Please, I beg you, take me on. Here's my plan. And I showed them my business plan. And they were like, oh, we don't know. We don't want to really take, you don't really have much experience. I'm like, I do. I did this and this and this. Anyway, they're still my management agency. Oh, I left them for a little bit. And then I came with my tail between my legs and I'm like, oh, sorry, you were right. And they are the best agency in the country. And they have I've got a spreadsheet from when I joined them in 2013 that has all these sheets on of their payments, and you can just see the graph of how I've grown, and also within the agency, and maintained that despite my age, gender, and race. Why? I'm constantly proactive about what I do. I'm constantly developing new skills. I'm constantly developing projects that showcase my skills in unique and interesting ways. Some of them are bad. Sometimes I fail. Sometimes it's embarrassing. But without those things are just data. It's not personal. You've got to remove the personal judgments of the thing. When you are the brand, you've got to learn how to separate the business. That's why the self-awareness and all of those things are for Nina. And these metrics that I use to look at the business are business metrics. It was really hard when I failed with the Otherwise You Well project. I had to take out a business loan, which I still haven't paid back yet. And I had to forgive myself for taking a business loan and for getting some debt that was associated with that project and remove it from my self-worth, because I was like, I'm in debt, I'm a bad person. Then I was like, no, I'm in debt because I took business loans and I was trying to develop something and I failed a bit. But now I've got data and there's something there. So it's paying for itself in different ways. But I couldn't, it took me a while to learn how to detach myself from that. And once I detached myself from that, I was free to be myself and focus on the next thing and be magnetic and have my self-esteem back, because I was tying my self-esteem to the debt. But it was business debt. But because you're the business, it's hard to see the wood for the trees. But you have to remove it, which is why you need these structures.
I'm just observing everything that you're saying. And, once more, what's behind it is with a bit of self-awareness and with a bit of responsibility, there can be action, and then comes achieving your goals. But it starts with the foundation of that self-awareness and taking responsibility. And then you can figure out anything.
Absolutely. Because if you don't know who you are, how do you know how you are? That's my overarching question for Otherwise You Well. How do you know how you are if you don't know who you are? My approach to well-being is a journey of self-awareness, and do whatever you can to know yourself. That's how you become a good comedian. That's how you become a good business person. That's how you become a good wife, husband, daughter, member of society. Self-awareness for me is key. But not self-awareness in the I'm this and that's my excuse. Self-awareness in the this is who I am. This is how I take accountability. This is how I contribute to society. Self-awareness not in a I need a label and I'm going to hide behind it. Self-awareness in a this is my label and this is how I'm going to make it better.
This is amazing. The last part of the podcast is called a fast fire.
Okay, let's go.
So I'm going to ask you these quick questions, and if you could give me a one-word answer or a short sentence.
Got you.
What's one truth you will continue to live by, regardless of what's happening around you?
Be yourself.
Authenticity. One rule you have to make that everyone will follow regardless of, that has to follow.
Tell the truth.
What's one guilty pleasure that not many people
I
know?
eat late at night. I eat sweets late at night. I eat sweets and
Before
sugary
bed.
things before bed.
Why?
It's actually, there's actually a medical reason for it. So the medication that I take just before I go to sleep has an effect on your histamines, and also like tries shutting your brain down. So in order for your body to fight to stay awake, it craves sugar. So my sugar cravings spike up just before my brain shuts down. So it's both comforting and it's a habit that I've formed, and it's like literally there's a reason for it. So it's hard, but it.
Do you know what somebody once told me? Is that if you're craving sweet things, you're craving sweetness in your life.
That's true. I'm definitely craving sweet things in my life.
In this season of your life, what do you want to let go of?
Attaching my self-esteem to financial success and people's opinions of me.
That's a big one. One thing you would say to young Nina right now?
Don't stop doing karate.
Why did you stop?
It wasn't an Olympic sport, and I'd reached the ceiling. I came like second at the World Champs. I was very, very good. And and there weren't sponsorships for things. I couldn't do anything with it as a career, and I wasn't willing to do it as a hobby because I'm so competitive. But what I didn't realize is that's what was keeping my ADHD at bay and what's making my life manageable.
Nina, thank you. This was amazing. Thank you for sharing your journey with me.
Thank you.
I think that what I've learned is, regardless of your situation, your circumstance, where you come from, what happened to you, you can accept that, and those could be valid. We don't want to dismiss everything that's happened. But then what? And you shared the power of taking responsibility and the outcome of that. And I think that's my biggest takeaway, amongst many other things that I still have to reflect on. But thank you for sharing with me, and thank you for
so
coming on
much.
the podcast today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. You ask such interesting and good questions. You're very, very good at this. I really wish
Thank
you
you.
well with this podcast. You're very, very good. I've been interviewed by many, many people for a long period of time. You ask some of the best questions I've ever heard. So thank you.
That means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah.